Hello, everybody. What is going on? Hey, Jim Cyril and Tanya Klein here from Coverage Inc., the leader in screenplay analysis, development, and editing services since 2002. What is that, about 47 years, Tanya?
At
Something like
least.
that? Yeah. So, Tanya, how are you today?
Not that good. It's raining outside. Come
Yeah.
on, people. None of us moved to Los Angeles for the rain.
I'm so tired of hearing Angelinos whining because they get a little bit of water on their head when they go out. There are people who live in places like, Sweden and,
In Ireland, in
and I,
Scotland. Yeah.
anyway, so, yeah, we're having a little bad weather day here in Los Angeles. Boo-hoo us. What are we talking about today that's of actual relevance to our audience?
All right, today we're going to talk about the first 10 pages of your script because, after all, those first 10 pages might be all you get.
Yeah, so what do you mean by that exactly? What do you mean might be all you get?
Well, what I mean by that is people are either interested in your writing or they're not, and they're either interested in your story or they're not, and they know that by page 10, usually even before then.
Right. They sometimes know that in the first paragraph. I
Yeah.
mean, they can tell your voice and your wordsmithery skills within, certainly the first page, generally, paragraph or two. As to story chops and, how concise you can be and all that stuff, that might take a page or two. But yeah, generally, if it's going to be worth continuing by the time you hit page 10.
Exactly. So basically, here is what you don't want to do. You don't want them to close the file and go, or the writing is bland, the writing is pedestrian, or simply, it didn't grab me.
So what do we need in the first 10? How do we grab someone? How do we show that, the writing is there, that you've got chops?
Well, let's first talk about what your first 10 pages usually are in classic screenplay structure. So, in
Okay.
classic screenplay structure, your first 10 pages are your setup. So, usually, depending on how involved the world is, sometimes, anywhere between 10 or 15 pages until your inciting incident, you're good.
Right.
So, what are you doing there? You're introducing the world, you're introducing your characters, in particular, your protagonist. And the important thing here is the people need to be interested in this world. And most of all, they need to want to see more of your protagonist. So, those are two very important things. And let me also just quickly, since, we've started talking about structure, say that what a lot of people, especially if you're writing in a genre, a lot of people have a hook scene and
Right.
putting it to good use because let's say you're writing a horror film.
Hmm.
You want to start out with, establishing the horror tone. And here's the thing, once you've established that tone, you can establish your world and your character without being afraid that your audience is going to go, oh, but I wanted to see a horror film. Nothing horrific has happened in 10 minutes.
Right. So set the tone right up
Set the
front.
tone, exactly. In particular, and not always necessary, but in particular for genres that have certain expectations, you also don't want to go into, some tonal discrepancies. But for genres with certain expectations, let's say horror, let's say sci-fi. So if you're writing a horror script, if you're writing a sci-fi script, have some sci-fi element, for example, up front, and often that's done by a hook scene. And then you
Oh, wait,
can
let me interrupt you there. So let's just clarify exactly what that is.
go for it.
In the first 10, right, generally speaking, and this is not true of every script, but it's, like Tanya said, certainly genre scripts benefit from this. But generally, in the first 10, we start out with the hook scene. Okay. The hook scene does exactly what it sounds like. It hooks you, right? It demonstrates the genre that you're writing in a very clear way. It demonstrates the tone of the script. Maybe it foreshadows what's going to be coming in, down the line. Maybe visually, maybe there's an image or imagery in that hook scene that, is thematic to the story being told. All of those things can happen in the first page or two. Generally, hook scene can be up to the first 3 pages, usually not advised to go longer than that. And the idea is it gives you a little taste of what's to come so that there's no surprises down the line. When you suddenly make a sharp turn from your horror script into comedy and things start getting really crazy, halfway through the second act, you better have set that up by indicating that this is going to happen in your hook scene. So that's generally the purpose of a hook scene. And by the way, this can also work in a drama or other genres as well. Again, we just need to establish the tone of what people are going to get, particularly if it's going to be a mashup of genres. You want to make sure that right up front, we at least hint at where the script is going so that people don't go, wait, where did this come from?
Exactly. And again, there is no rule that says you have to have a hook scene. You don't.
Yeah.
It's in particular if you have, if you're leaning heavily into a genre, it is advised, but just so you can
It
set
never hurts.
it,
It
yeah, it never
never
hurts.
hurts to have
But
one,
again,
even with a drama.
not necessary if you don't feel it serves your story. Because let's face it, the first and most important thing is always it needs to serve your story, it needs to serve your script.
Right.
However, what you always want to have, apart from fantastic, scintillating writing in the first 10 pages, which is where your voice comes in, you want to make sure the audience's feet are firmly planted in the world that you're setting up
Right.
and firmly interested in the character, your protagonist, that has to carry the story, that has to carry this movie. So, one of the most important things to know is if the audience looks at your protagonist and goes, that's it, you lost them.
Or if there's no there. I mean, lots of times we read scripts where there's just no setup at all, and we're just supposed to accept that this person is our protagonist or these characters or our co-protagonists or whatever the script calls for, simply because that's the role that they're assigned in the story. And we don't get to know anything about them. Okay, that's not ideal. It can work if we sort of unpeel the onion and learn more about these people down the line. But the idea, it's called a setup for a reason. We need to, like Tanya said, set up the world. We need to understand the world of the story. Now, that character or characters will likely go on a journey during the story, according to classic screenplay structure, and that world may change. But what we're doing in the first 10 is we're setting up the character's known world, okay? Whatever that person's day to day looks like before the craziness of the inciting incident hits. So we establish the world. What is this world? Is it our day to day world? Is it a world from the past? Do we need to clue people into how things work in this world? Is it another planet? Is it another universe? So all of these things come to bear in the first 10 pages. We have to lay a lot of pipe, right? If this can be done, look at Star Wars, for example. Long ass crawl at the beginning of that movie, and then by the time the movie actually starts, we know what the world is that this is taking place. And we're like, okay, cool. We don't need any exposition to get us there. Or another great example, Children of Men, right? Which used a lot of different techniques in the first 10 pages in the setup to explain to us the rules of this world that we're in, from terrorist attack to bulletin boards to the old pan over the cork board with pictures on it, trick. I mean, there's so many different ways we can establish what the world is. And in addition to that, we need to set up the characters. Who are these people? What are they having trouble doing? What are they like as people? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses?
So here's the
Yeah.
thing with, first of all, setting up the world. Um, the amount of work you have to do with setting up your world actually really depends on what your world is. If you're setting your script 500 years in the future on an alien planet, there's going to be a lot more setup
Yeah.
than if you're going to set it in the present in the house next door.
Right. Yeah, yeah. A lot more heavy lifting with anything that's other than the world that we all know. I mean, even something that takes place in, like, say, I don't know, the 70s might take a lot of world building because, I mean, the 70s were 50 years ago now. You know, a lot of people, most of the people reading the script are not going
I've
to have
been
been
born.
born. Yeah, in the 70s.
Yeah.
So you need to take these things into account. Rotary phones, does anyone even know what that is? So, obviously there's going to be a little bit of, use your own best judgment as to what needs to be explained. We don't want to over explain, but yeah, you're going to need a fair amount of setup if your world is anything other than the world that we know. But just going back to the hook scene though, one technique that is used a lot in action movies and can work in many other types of movies as well, romantic comedies, whatever, is the technique of show your protagonist doing what he or she does best in that hook scene. Okay. So if your protagonist is a hotshot hostage negotiator, that's what you want to show in your hook scene. A really tense scene where you know that your character does his or her job incredibly well, or maybe incredibly poorly, and everything goes to shit. But the point is, that clues us into the worlds of the story as well as gets us to know our protagonist in a dynamic and visual setting.
Yeah, so the important thing about a protagonist, any protagonist, is the first question you should ask yourself as a writer is, why is this character my protagonist? Why is this character the perfect and the only character that would work as a protagonist for this particular story?
Yeah.
So let's give a Shakespearean example. All
Oh,
right,
by all means.
let's take two plays that we're all familiar with, Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet.
Oh,
Okay. So let's say if Romeo, if you switch those two protagonists, let's say we put Hamlet into Romeo and Juliet, and we'll put Romeo into Hamlet. Would that work? Well, no. I mean, okay, so
I
put.
want to see that movie.
All right, so you're putting Hamlet into Romeo and Juliet. You know what would happen? Absolutely nothing, because Hamlet, being Hamlet, would think about Juliet, and then he would think some more about Juliet, and then he would soliloquy about, should I really approach Juliet? I don't know. I should I? Well, the. Or now let's put Romeo into Hamlet. Well, something would happen. Romeo would see the ghost. He would go kill his stepfather. I mean, something would happen. It would be a very, 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 very short play. So, why is that? Because of who these two characters are, what their psychological makeup is, how they act. So, which means again, let's keep Hamlet where he is. Let's keep Romeo where he is.
A slightly more contemporary example might be Walter White, right? Of course, I had to go for a Breaking
Yeah.
Bad example, right? But I mean, could anyone other than Walter White, the character as depicted in Breaking Bad, be the star of Breaking Bad? It's that character's psychology, constantly being screwed out of what he feels he deserves his entire life, his being stuck in this middle class semi existence. It's all of these things that drive the story. You put anyone else in there, it's a different story.
Yeah. And here's the thing. When we're talking about protagonists, so there's this misconception that your protagonist always has to be likable. They
Mhm.
don't. They don't. Anti-heroes are a thing.
Sure.
But I think often because of this misconception, often what happens seems to be that all of the characters in the script are very interesting except the protagonist. The protagonist is kind of bland and kind of, just, square, and you're like,
Right.
yeah, that is weird. Why are all of these characters so interesting, but the protagonist, who should be the most interesting of them all, isn't? And I think that's
Oh, yeah.
because writers are afraid to actually give their protagonist
Flaws.
flaws.
Dirty them
Yes.
up. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. But look, I mean, there is a certain school of screenwriting thought which has been around for decades. I sort of came up with this, where your protagonist is the squeaky clean one, and everyone around that person is, quirky or weird or oddball or, dirty or flawed or whatever, but not the protagonist, of course, But one thing we've all discovered, I think, is the more flawed the protagonist is, the more we can relate to them to a point. I mean, a great example, and they taught this at UCLA, Hustle and Flow, right? The character of DJ, absolutely, this is a reprehensible character, right? But we understand him. We feel for him. God, we would never behave, I hope not, like his behavior, but the way, and kudos to uh
Terrence Howard.
thank you to Terrence Howard for incredible performance, for bringing that to life to the point where it does actually touch us emotionally, right? But there's a great example of someone who's incredibly flawed. Jessica Jones, another one. Just, I mean, she's constantly, she makes bad decisions. She drinks too much. Yet, we like her. We're along with her for the ride. There's a million examples like that. House, another one. So, yeah, don't be afraid to dirty up your character and make them dimensional and relatable.
Exactly. And I think that is really the most important thing because, again, your reader, your gatekeeper is your audience. And your audience has to look at the protagonist and go, "Oh, wow. Yeah, I want to see more of this person."
The last thing I think we need to hit regarding the first 10, we touched on it briefly, is, craft and technique and chops and voice. All of these things kind of go together. It's basically your skill, how your skill presents on the page, and if you've got it or if you don't got it. There's a lot of screenplays that have really good ideas, good stories, and many good elements that are let down, betrayed by the craft not being where it's at. Um, that's just something that you're going to have to work at. And I mean, there's a lot of resources out there to learn this stuff. And frankly, the more you do it, the better at it you get. But there's a lot of things that go into screenwriting, a lot of expectations from people in the business that you may not know when you're first starting out, or even after 5 years. You may have written 5 or 10 scripts already, and you may still not know what you're doing wrong. But so much of it is about voice, how you convey things can you do it in a compelling and interesting way, your word choices, your brevity, that's an incredibly important thing. Respect for people's time. If you can say the same thing in 2 sentences, then you've got it way ahead of somebody who just said a similar thing in 7 sentences. So that's out of the scope of this video, but that's one of the main components of the first 10. Because, I mean, great character, setup, hook scene, voice, and craft. That is what people are looking for in the first 10. And if you're missing any one of those things, they're not going to progress to the next 10, which is where the inciting incident is. And we'll cover that in another video.
In fact, we'll cover that probably in our next video.
Most likely. Uh, Thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate all of you. If you liked what you heard, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We are trying to grow our channel, and we'd really appreciate you sharing this with anybody you think might get something out of it.
Yeah, and
Thanks so
again,
much.
if you have any questions about anything, you can always email us at info@coverageinc.com.
Advice is always free. Peace out, everybody.